Mrs. Yeobright is dead. Eustachia is desperate. Clym is half-blind. And on the other side, Wildeve, supercharged with inheritance, is back on the hunt. Thomasin is too innocent to exist unless she has Ven, our local vigilante, on her side. A return awaits validation. An escape is long overdue. You are watching Nibblepop, and in this video, we'll discover together how the fateful fifth act unfolds itself, which Hardy calls. Hardy calls his fifth book The Discovery. We can, of course, understand which discovery he's talking about. What is hidden so far is the knowledge about his mother's journey to his house, and this knowledge has been denied to Clym because of Eustacia Weir. So will he get to know about this incident and how is he going to react to it? That is going to be the crux of this whole book. Now, just like in the other books, we have these chapter divisions with their individual titles which give a hint to what is happening in that chapter. For instance, the first chapter in fifth book is called Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery. Of course, by misery, we know there is a direct reference to Clym's condition because he is in a miserable state. Earlier, we have seen him singing despite his misfortune, despite his failing eyesight, which made us feel that he is basically an optimistic person who knows how to celebrate life even when life shuts him out or he is defeated in some way. But his mother's death is something very different. Here we see that the usual cheerfulness which we associated so far with Clym, who was singing even when he was turning blind, that cheerfulness leaves him and he is really in misery. Let me read a little bit from here. One evening, about 3 weeks after the funeral of Mrs. Yeobright, when the silver face of the moon sent a bundle of beams directly upon the floor of Clym's house at Alderworth. So Hardy has this beautiful way of expressing things, and especially when he describes nature, he is really extravagant. So what he's trying to say is there is a moonlit night where the moonlight is falling on the floor of Clym's house. A woman came forth from within. So, of course, this is Eustachia. She reclined over the garden gate as if to refresh herself a while. Now, a man comes up and speaks to her. This man is Humphrey. He is also a native there. We have a lot of interaction between the sophisticated group of people and the natives of Egdon, and Humphrey is a native. He comes and he speaks to Eustacia about Clym. How is he tonight, ma'am, if you please? He is better, though still very unwell, Humphrey. Is he light-headed, ma'am? No, he is quite sensible now. Do he rave about his mother just the same, poor fellow? Just as much, though not quite so wildly. It was very unfortunate, ma'am, that the boy Johnny should ever have told him his mother's dying words about her being broken-hearted and cast off by her son. It was enough to upset any man alive. Now we know why Clym is upset. He is upset because his mother is dead, yes. But he is more upset because somehow Johnny Nonsuch's words have made him feel very responsible for the unhappiness which Mrs. Yeobright had in her heart when she died. That's why he was feeling guilty. And then Eustacia comes inside and talks about the moon, and of course Clym cannot see the beauty of the moon anymore, and he says in a satiric way almost, "Shining, is it? What's the moon to a man like me? Let it shine, let anything be, so that I never see another day. Eustacia, I don't know where to look. My thoughts go through me like swords." So he is hurting himself. The thoughts he is having are killing him right now. Oh, if any man wants to make himself immortal by painting a picture of wretchedness, let him come here. Why do you say so? Eustacia wants to cheer him up, wants to make him feel different. I cannot help feeling that I did my best to kill her. No, Clym. And Eustacia, at the back of her mind, she is always worried that Clym is so upset without even knowing that his mother was coming to him. He had actually come to her. And how would he react if he actually knew the whole thing? That the mother had come and was not able to enter the house. She was dreading this moment. Thomasin comes in one day. Thank you for coming tonight, said Clym when she entered the room. Here am I, you see, such a wretched spectacle am I, that I shrink from being seen by a single friend and almost from you. So, of course, Thomasin has a connection with Clym, which is through Mrs. Yeobright. So, Mrs. Yeobright's death has definitely moved her a lot too, because she had the figure of Mrs. Yeobright as her guardian figure all through her life. And we know that Thomasin is such a kind woman. Of course, she is affected so much by the death of Mrs. Yeobright. Anyway, Clym feels that he should have been dead, but his health is getting better, which is unfortunate according to him. And he says, for unfortunately, I am going to live. I feel myself getting better. Thomasin, how long are you going to stay at the inn now that all this money has come to your husband? So he's making some casual inquiry into what Thomasin and her husband are going to do. And, Eustachia is very close by. She can hear what they are saying. Another month or two probably until my illness is over. We cannot get off till then. I think it will be a month or more. Later on, we'll get to know that she's actually pregnant, and that's why she's ill. She cannot move now. Yes, of course. Cousin Tampsy, you will get over your trouble. One little month will take you through it and bring something to console you. But I shall never get over mine, and no consolation will come. So he somehow feels that Thomasin still has a chance of getting happy, while he has lost every chance that he has. Then Eustachia asks Thomasin how she had got to their place, and she says that Damon brought her here, and then later he will come to pick her up. Now, while Damon came to pick her up, it was Eustachia who first goes and talks to him, and she tells him about what is happening in her mind right then. Wildeve at first thought it was Thomasin. And then when he saw that it was Eustachia who had come to greet him, he was quite surprised and he said, well, I have not yet told him. She replied in a whisper. Who has not told what? Eustachia had not told Clym yet that the mother was there in their house and she did not open the door. Then don't do so till he is well. It will be fatal. You are ill yourself. I am wretched, O Damon. And then she starts crying. I can't tell you how unhappy I am. I can hardly bear this. I can tell nobody of my trouble. Nobody knows it but you. So they are having this kind of vicious bond of something sinister, which only they know. And the fact that nobody else knows about what happened that day, that kind of binds Eustacia and Wildeve closer. It's like they're sharing a secret now. Poor girl. And then he says, it is hard when you have done nothing to deserve it. And then he goes on saying that he should have been there to save her and all. And then he says a very important thing. Well, wait till he is better and trust to chance. And when you tell, you must only tell part for his own sake. That means he wants to save himself. Which part should I keep back? Wildeve paused. That I was in the house at the time, he said in a low tone. Yes, it must be concealed. Seeing what has been whispered, how much easier are hasty actions than speeches that will excuse them. If he were only to die. Wildeve says that if Clym was dead, things would have been okay for them. Do not think of it. Eustacia doesn't want that. I would not buy hope of immunity by so cowardly a desire, even if I hated him. So I want to be immune to punishment. I want to be immune to judgment. I want to be saved from judgment, but not at the cost of wishing that somebody was dead. That's cowardice. Now I'm going up to him again. Thomasin bade me tell you she would be down in a few minutes. Goodbye. And there the conversation ends. The first chapter ends as well. In the second chapter, we have a very disturbing thing happening. A lurid light breaks in upon a darkened understanding. Now, usually the words light and understanding, they are very positive words. But look at the adjectives used here: lurid, darkened. So, what Hardy is doing is somehow destabilizing the idea of positivity here. That not all understanding brings happiness or even hope or joy or optimism. It brings a lot of misery as well. The chapter begins with Christian Cantle, who informs Clym about Thomasin's childbirth. Thomasin has given birth to a daughter and Wildeve is not very happy about it. After that, Clym asks, "Did you see my mother the day before she died?" So Clym is talking to Christian Cantle, another native. "Did you see my mother the day before she died?" "No, I did not." Your bride's face expressed disappointment. "But I seed her the morning of the same day she died." Seed her means saw her. That's the native way of speaking. "That's nearer still to my meaning." "Yes, I know it was the same day. For she said, 'I be going to see him, Christian, so I shall not want any vegetables brought in for dinner.'" Christian Cantle was the one who used to serve at Mrs. Yeobride's place. So when Mrs. Yeobride had planned to visit her son, she had said Christian that today I'll be going to meet him, so don't bring in any vegetables. We won't be having much food later on, because she was expecting that she will be treated well at her son's place. Maybe they will offer her food. Very sad, isn't it? See whom? Clym is now surprised. "See you. She was going to your house. You understand?" Your bride regarded Christian with intense surprise. "Why, you never mentioned this? Are you sure it was my house she was coming to?" "Oh yes, I didn't mention it because I never seed you lately. And as she didn't get there, it was all naught and nothing to tell." Christian thinks that Mrs. Yeobride died while going to Clym's house. So he thought that, okay, she didn't reach the place, so what's the point of even telling it? "And I have been wondering why she should have walked in the heath on that hot day." "Well, did she say what she was coming for?" "It is a thing, Christian. I am very anxious to know." "Yes, Mr. Clym, she didn't say it to me, though I think she did to one here and there." So Christian says that no, she didn't tell me, but she told somebody else. And then when Clym asks who is that other person to whom Mrs. Yeobride told everything, of course, Christian says it's the riddle man, Diggory Wen. Clym goes to his mother's house, Bloom's End, and there Diggory Wen comes in. Now, when Diggory Wen comes, usually his profession takes him away from Egdon a lot. So, he was unaware of Mrs. Yeobride's death. He had directly come from outside Egdon and straight away came to meet Mrs. Yeobride, probably to know what had happened, because he had a conversation with Mrs. Yeobride where she had said that she'll be going to meet her son. "Good morning," said the little man. "Is Mrs. Yeobride at home?" Clym was there. Yeobride looked upon the ground. "Then you have not seen Christian or any of the Egdon folks. So you haven't met anybody. Then everybody would have told you." "No, I have only just returned after a long stay away. I called here the day before I left." "And you have heard nothing?" "Nothing. My mother is dead." "Dead," said Wen mechanically. He is clueless. How can she be just dead? Her home now is where I shouldn't mind having mine. So she is in heaven and I want to go there, because Clym is also feeling very miserable right now. Wen regarded him. So Wen looked at him and then said, "If I didn't see your face, I could never believe your words. Have you been ill?" "I had an illness." "Well, the change." When I parted from her a month ago, everything seemed to say that she was going to begin a new life, and what seemed came true. So, Mrs. Yeobright has begun a new life, away from this life. You say right, no doubt. Trouble has taught you a deeper vein of talk than mine. Deeper vein of talk means when you speak with darker words. Usually, as I was telling you, Clym was a cheerful fellow. And now he is speaking in a miserable way, using dark words, appearing to be very pessimistic. This is something we usually associate with the Riddle Man. He is not very cheerful because he has only lost everything all through his life. Lost the love he wanted, and his life is pretty miserable, trying to make the woman happy without being with her. That kind of responsibility which he has thrust upon himself, it's miserable. That deeper vein of talk, that pessimistic tone is now heard in Clym's voice. All I meant was regarding her life here. She has died too soon, perhaps through my living too long. I have had a bitter experience on that score this last month, Diggory, but come in, I have been wanting to see you. So they have this conversation, and there he understands that he needs to go and meet this little boy who was with his mother during her last moments. So he goes out of his house later and looks for Susan Nunset's house. It is towards Mistover. I think you already know about the map of Egdon. In the last video, we have given you a map which we have made for you. So in that map, you can see that from Bloom's End, one road goes towards Alderworth, but Clym doesn't go. He goes towards Mistover, and there he takes a detour and goes to Susan Nunset's house. He meets Johnny and asks him, "You have not forgotten how you walked with the poor lady on that hot day," said Clym. "No." So Johnny remembers. "And what she said to you?" The boy repeated the same words, that Mrs. Yeobright was cast away by her son and she was heartbroken. "She was going to Alderworth when you first met her?" Alderworth is Clym's house. "So was my mother coming towards my house?" "No, she was coming away." "So she was coming away from your house?" "That can't be." "Yes, she walked along with me. I was coming away too." "Then where did you first see her?" "At your house." "Attend and speak the truth." "Yes, sir. At your house was where I seed her first." Clym started up, and Susan smiled in an expectant way. Susan's smile shows that she knows Eustacia Weir is responsible for some mischief here. Susan hates Eustacia Weir. She knows that Eustacia Weir is responsible for all the trouble in her life. Her son's sickness, which happens whenever Eustacia is near. Susan smiles at Clym. It seemed to mean something sinister is coming. Something evil is happening. "What did she do at my house?" Now Johnny replies, "She went and sat under the trees at the Devil's Bellows." Good God, this is all news to me. "What did she do then?" "Looked at a man who came up and went into your house." So see, Mrs. Yeobright was narrating her whole experience, and at the same time Johnny was present in around the same place to see the rest. So what Clym gets from Johnny is a complete report. So we don't know how much Johnny actually saw, how much Mrs. Yeobright must have blabbered to him while walking down with him because she was delirious. Anyway, Clym gets the whole picture very clearly here. So what was my mother doing? She looked at a man who came up and went into your house. Clym thought it was he himself. That was myself, a furze cutter with brambles in his hand. No, it was not you. It was a gentleman. You had gone in afore, so you went in earlier. It was somebody else she saw. Who was he? I don't know. Now tell me what happened next. The poor lady went and knocked at your door, and the lady with black hair looked out of the side window at her. The boy's mother turned to Clym and said, "This is something you didn't expect?" Yeobright took no more notice of her than if he had been of stone. Go on, go on. And when she saw the young lady look out of the window, the old lady knocked again, and when nobody came, she took up the furze hook and looked at it and put it down again, which means that that old lady knew that her son was inside, because that furze cutting tools, they were at the doorstep. So this old woman, she looked at those tools, and then she looked at the faggot bonds, and then she went away and walked across to me and blowed her breath very hard, like this. We walked on together, she and I. So Johnny is narrating a very interesting thing, because he knows that he's getting so much attention, and children love attention. So Johnny is telling all the details that he remembers. She and I talked to her, and she talked to me a bit, but not much, because she couldn't blow her breath. Oh, let's have more. Clym wants to know more. She couldn't talk much. She couldn't walk, and her face was so queer. How was her face? Like yours is now. So it was obviously white. And Clym's face is also like that now. Cast off by my son. No, by my best life, dear mother. It is not so. But by your sons. Your sons. So he now knows that his mother was not cast off by him, but by his wife. May all murderesses get the torment they deserve. And then he gets absolutely furious, rushes out. With these words, Eobright went forth from the little dwelling. And there he comes and confronts his wife in the 3rd chapter. Eustachia dresses herself on a black morning. The anomaly of qualifiers continue. Black morning. We have black nights. We have black evenings. We don't have black mornings. With Eustacia Weir and with Clym storming in, this is going to be a very, very black morning, of course. Eustacia heard Clym getting in the house, and she gets up. Probably she was sleeping, and then she was in front of her mirror. Her hair was not yet tied up, and at that time it's so cinematic. Hardy creates these scenes as if you're watching a play, and Clym just stands behind her so she can see the reflection of Clym's face in the mirror, and Clym can see her face. So when she was looking at Clym's face, it was ashy, haggard and terrible. Now that discovery has its impact. So this is the impact. Yes, you can listen to me. It seems that my wife is not very well. Why? So Eustacia's face has also turned quite pale, because somehow she had been dreading this moment. By looking at Clym's face, she can understand that something has seriously gone wrong, and she fears that maybe Clym has been informed of the reality that had taken place. So looking at her whitened face, he says that, I think you're not well. Why? Your face, my dear, your face. Or perhaps it is the pale morning light which takes your color away. Now I am going to reveal a secret to you. Clym has become really so shocked by this news that he's definitely going to act in this manner. And we can't expect him to be very logical, methodical and, sweet when he is confronting his wife. So he is appearing to be a little like a madman. Oh, that is ghastly. What? Your laugh. There is reason for ghastliness, Eustacia. You have held my happiness in the hollow of your hand. Like a devil, you have dashed it down. So he now has somebody to blame for his mother's death. That could have acted as a consolation that he is not responsible, but it cannot be a consolation, but because it's his own wife who is now responsible. She started back from the dressing table, retreated a few steps from him and looked him in the face. Ah, you think to frighten me, she said with a slight laugh. Is it worthwhile? I'm undefended and alone. How extraordinary. What do you mean? As there is ample time, I will tell you, though you know well enough, I mean that it is extraordinary that you should be alone in my absence. So Eustacia is saying, see, I'm alone, undefended. So please don't behave in this rude manner. And then Clym is saying, of course, it's a very strange thing that you are alone in my company. How can a wife be alone in the company of the husband? So usually what happens, now this is the problem with Victorian novelists. They are less of realistic people, and they believe that these kinds of elaborate dialogue is plausible between husband and wife, especially in these high-strung moments. And this tradition continued through these long dialogues and conversations. Even in movies, we see that it is very unrealistic. But who were the readers for Hardy? They were people, mostly middle class people, and some belonging to the higher rungs of society who had ample reading time, and they loved these conversations. Although in real life, I'm pretty sure no husband would speak to his wife in this situation using such elaborate expressions. So this is more like written English we are looking at. This cannot be realistic writing. So this is something you get in Victorian fiction, against which we have the modern fiction genre coming up. And we will see later when we will probably read Heart of Darkness maybe someday, or other modern novels. We will see how much things have changed, how much these conventions have changed. Anyway, let's come back to this. When Clym confronts his wife, he asks that who was there on that day and where was he? In the chimney? Where was he? And then she says, I don't know, I don't remember. Which day are you talking about and all? The day, I mean, was the day you shut the door against my mother and killed her. Oh, it is too much, too bad. He leant over the footpiece of the bedstead for a few moments with his back towards her, then rising again. Tell me, do you hear? Now he holds her sleeve. So it's the most physical, you can say, violence that we see from Clym. The most he can do is just pull her sleeve, and she says, you want to tear this up? And then they have this very bitter fight. Clym, do you think you dare do anything to me that I dare not bear? But before you strike me, listen, you will get nothing from me by a blow, even though it should kill me, as it probably will. But perhaps you do not wish me to speak. Killing may be all you mean. Kill you? Do you expect it? So Clym is like, okay, you think I can kill you? And Eustacia says, yes. Phew, I shall not kill you. I did think of it, but I shall not. That would be making a martyr of you and sending you to where she is, and I would keep you away from her till the universe come to an end if I could. Bitter fight there. He wants to know who the man is. By my wretched soul, you sting me, Eustacia. I can keep it up, and hotly too. Now then, madam, tell me his name. Never, I am resolved. How often does he write to you? Where does he put his letters? When does he meet you? Ah, his letters. Do you tell me his name? I do not. And then he goes on to Eustacia's table where she kept her letters, and it was locked. Unlock this. You have no right to say it. That's mine. And then he sees the desks, dashed it, and the letters were out. He took out one single envelope on which the handwriting was clearly Wildeve's, although the contents of the letter was not there. What was in this letter? He said. Ask the writer. Am I your hound that you should talk to me in this way? So am I your pet dog? I'm going away now. I shall leave you. You need not go, as I am going myself. You will keep just as far away from me by staying here. So Eustacia, instead of Clym, leaves the house. Eustacia goes to her grandfather's place. But before going, Clym says these final harsh words. How bewitched I was. So, yes, everybody told me she is a witch, she is a bad woman. And then he says, how could there be any good in a woman that everybody spoke ill of? Oh, she cried, breaking down at last and shaking with sobs which choked her. She sank upon her knees. Oh, will you have done? Oh, you're too relentless. There's a limit to the cruelty of savages. I have held out long, but you crush me down. She leaves. And just after some time, something very funny happens. Eustachia had not long been gone when there came a knock at the door of the bedroom, and Eubryde said, well, it was the servant. And she replied, somebody from Mrs. Wildeve's have called to tell you that the missus and the baby are getting on wonderfully well. Earlier we knew that Thomasin has given birth to a baby girl, and they are happy now, happy and well. And the baby's name is to be Eustachia Clementine. And the girl retired. What a mockery, said Clym. This unhappy marriage of mine to be perpetuated in the child's name. So this is chance and coincidence in Egdon. This is fate happening. This is irony that pervades the entirety of human destiny. So this is what Hardy is for you. He is the creator of tragic irony, dramatic irony, down to the last page. Chapter 4, Ministrations of a Half-Forgotten One. Of course, half-forgotten one here means Charlie. Here I am going to just give you a brief summary of what happens here. Charlie begins to take care of Eustachia, and he notices that Eustachia somehow expresses deep interest in the pistols which lay hanging in her grandfather's shelf. He takes them away. Eustachia goes back to that place, wants to kill herself with the pistols, but she finds them gone, and Charlie protects her in that way. So we see a lot of silent admiration from Charlie, and the presence of Charlie is very important because 5th of November comes, and to cheer her up, Charlie lights a bonfire. Now, Charlie lights that bonfire simply to follow the tradition of the place. But whenever there is a bonfire lit at Miss Tovernap, straight across the heath, the Quiet Woman Inn, or rather, the man at the Quiet Woman Inn feels that it's a signal. And he comes. Such faithfulness, such consistency. He comes, splash in the pond. There was a second splash into the pond, and Eustachia is so surprised. Eustachia comes out and she is very hesitant. She says, I did not light the fire. I did not call you. Damon didn't know that Eustachia was living here, and he asked about what was going on in her life, and she tells him everything, and somehow she feels that she needs some help to escape the heat. Where do you wish to go? I have a place in my mind. If you could help me as far as Budmouth, I can do the rest. So see, Eustachia is very proud. She doesn't want to be the mistress of Damon Wildeve. She wants his assistance. And when he says, shall I go with you? I am rich now. She was silent. She did not say yes. Later on, she says, I will think of this, whether I can honestly make use of you as a friend or must close with you as a lover. That is what I ask myself. If I wish to go and decide to accept your company, I will signal to you some evening at 8 o'clock, and this will mean that you are to be ready with a horse and trap at 12 o'clock in the same night to drive me to Budmouth. So they arrange for an escape, and this signal will be straight at 8 o'clock. I will look out every night at 8. We know, yes, Wildeve will do that. Chapter 6, Thomasin argues with her cousin. He writes a letter. The heading gives you all, the title gives you all. So we will just read the letter. Thomasin comes and tells Clym that you should make up with her. Life cannot go on like this, You should move on together. And Clym decides to write a letter, and I'll read to you the letter. My dear Eustachia, I must obey my heart without consulting my reason too closely. So in the very beginning, he says that his heart is saying something, logic is saying something else. So because of his emotions, he is writing, not because of his intellect. Will you come back to me? Do so. And the past shall never be mentioned. Now this man is really very sad without his wife, isn't he? I was too severe. But oh, Eustachia, the provocation, you don't know, you never will know that what those words of anger cost me, which you drew down upon yourself. So he is sad because of what he has said to her. All that an honest man can promise you, I promise now, which is that from me you shall never suffer anything on this score again. After all the vows we've made, Eustacia, I think we had better pass the remainder of our lives in trying to keep them. So during their wedding, they had made certain promises to stay together, for better, for worse, and he wants her to hold on to that now. Come to me then, even if you reproach me. I have thought of your sufferings that morning on which I parted from you. I know they were genuine, and they are as much as you ought to bear. Our love must still continue. Such hearts as ours would never have been given us, but to be concerned with each other. He says that they have very special hearts, and they were given these special hearts because they were supposed to be together. Every lover feels that way, that I'm special, my beloved is special. Nobody else in this world is as special as we two are, and therefore we should be together. That's the usual lover's logic here. I could not ask you back at first, Eustacia, for I was unable to persuade myself that he who was with you was not there as a lover. But if you will come and explain distracting appearances, I do not question that you can show your honesty to me. Why have you not come before? Do you think I will not listen to you? So he now wants to offer her a chance to explain to him that yes, there was a man, but not as a lover. He was ready to believe that. So this makes us feel bad about Clym, that he is suffering so much in his loneliness that he is ready to disregard the situation where maybe his wife was with a lover. Do you think I will not listen to you? Surely not. When you remember the kisses and vows we exchanged under the summer moon, return then. It wasn't the summer moon, it was the eclipse. You remember? I do. Return then, and you shall be warmly welcomed. I can no longer think of you to your prejudice. I am but too much absorbed in justifying you, your husband as ever, etc. Thomasin comes back from Clym's place and has a bitter conversation with Wildeve about his wanderings, because Wildeve has been wandering about a lot. But Thomasin is a weak person. She cannot confront Wildeve in a very strong way and just complains that you are away all the time. Now comes the night of the 6th of November, chapter 7. This was the night when Eustacia decided to leave Egdon Heath. So we will be reading this chapter in greater detail. Towards evening on the 6th, her determination to go away again revived. So she was having these mixed feelings. Sometimes she was unsure whether she should be leaving, but this was the night when she thought she should. About 4 o'clock, she packed up anew the few small articles, so she packed things up. And then, when she came out of her house, first she had to give the signal to Wildeve at 8 o'clock. Now, how to pass the time till 8 o'clock? She was wandering about, and there was Susan Nunset's cottage. Her boy was very ill that day, Johnny. And when Eustacia was moving about, Susan saw Eustacia's figure in it. Because it was dark, she looked like a phantom, a ghost, as if floating about. And then she comes down to this designated place, lights up a stem with fire, and waved it in the air. It was 8 o'clock. It was the signal for Wildeve. And she saw that Wildeve also, from Quiet Woman Inn, gave a flash signal back, which means that he has seen it. Parallelly, what was happening? Timothy Fairway, a native, he brings Clym's letter to Eustacia's grandfather. Now, Eustacia, after lighting that signal, she now had 4 hours to wait for midnight when she would escape. So she goes back to her room, and it was not lit up. She pretended to be asleep. The grandfather, he looks at the letter, at the envelope. He turned it over and over and fancied that the writing was her husband's, though he could not be sure. However, he decided to let her have it at once if possible and took it upstairs for that purpose. So, Eustacia's grandfather took the letter upstairs to Eustacia's room. But on reaching the door of a room and looking in at the keyhole, he found there was no light within, the fact being that Eustacia, without undressing, had flung herself upon the bed to rest and gather a little strength for her coming journey. So she was taking a nap because she had a long journey ahead. Her grandfather concluded from what he saw that he ought not to disturb her, and descending again to the parlour, he placed the letter on the mantelpiece to give it to her in the morning. Chance and coincidence. The letter could have arrived earlier. Clym could have written it the day before. No. It had to be on this fateful evening, and it had to reach the grandfather a little too late. At 11:30, that is close to the time of escape, Eustacia gets up, lights a candle, put on some warm outer wrappings, taken her bag in her hand, extinguishing the light again, descended the staircase. Now Hardy will begin to describe each and every step that Eustacia takes, and we will read along. When she got into the outer air, she found that it had begun to rain. If you feel that this video is getting too long, pause it, take a break, come back, because I am not going to compromise here. I am not going to read any less. Okay, so you have to pause and you have to come back if you are tired, because I am definitely not. Okay, when she got onto the outer air, she found that it had begun to rain. So Egdon was rousing from its sleep. It was starting to rain. And as she stood pausing at the door, it increased, threatening to come on heavily. But having committed herself to this line of action, there was no retreating for bad weather. Now the whole thing has been planned in such a meticulous way. She didn't want to give excuse that it's a bad weather, so I'm going to stay back. She had to go on with her plan. Even the receipt of Clym's letter would not have stopped her now. We don't know that. Hardy feels that, or rather this narrator feels that even if she received Clym's letter at this moment, not at 8 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, if the letter reached her, maybe she would have done something else. We don't know. But now it was too late. Her whole body was ready to move on. The gloom of the night was funereal. All nature seemed clothed in crape. Look at the death-like imagery Hardy is using. The spiky points of the fir trees behind the house rose into the sky like the turrets and pinnacles of an abbey. Nothing below the horizon was visible, save a light which was still burning in the cottage of Susan Nonsuch. Everything was dark, stormy. The only light visible was inside the cottage of Susan Nonsuch. Eustacia at length reached Rainbarrow and stood still there to think. Never was harmony more perfect than that between the chaos of her mind and the chaos of the world without. This is where she was totally in tune with Egdon. Egdon was weeping. She was weeping too. Egdon was darkened. Her heart was darkened too. So this was the moment where she becomes Egdon Heath. So how can she escape? Because this is the essence which sustains her, which gives her so much strength, so much divinity. Imagine Eustacia walking on the roads in Paris. Nobody would even look at her. Everybody looks like Eustacia or even more glamorous. In Egdon, she was the goddess. And this divinity, this power which she had in Egdon Heath was the cause of her misery too. Let's see. A sudden recollection had flashed on her this moment. She had not money enough for undertaking a long journey. Now Hardy comes to a real problem. The problem of a woman in Victorian times. Without any access to money, she would have to depend on other men. And she doesn't want to do that. So you see, she is not trying to escape because she wants to be with Wildeve. It's not an illicit affair that we are looking at here. She has no other option but Wildeve to take her away from here. I'm not justifying her going away, but I'm saying please don't consider her as a person who is unfaithful in love or in marriage. Amid the fluctuating sentiments of the day, her unpractical mind had not dwelt on the necessity of being well provided, that is, having a lot of money. And now that she thoroughly realized the conditions, She sighed bitterly and ceased to stand erect, gradually crouching down under the umbrella, as if she were drawn into the barrow by a hand from beneath, as if she was being pulled down into Egdon. Her whole persona was crouching down. She couldn't stand erect. Could it be that she was to remain a captive still? That means she considered herself to be in a prison. But even if she managed to go to Paris, if she depended on a man, then it would be an equally miserable prison. Therefore, here Hardy gives at least an idea to us about the serious misery, and he actually brings to light the problem of or rather the necessity of economic independence. Had Eustachia been economically independent, she would have left Clym earlier. She wouldn't have even married Clym. That would have saved her a lot of misery, saved Clym a lot of misery, everybody a lot of misery. If she had a profession to follow, she could actually sponsor herself out of Egdon. But she has to depend on men, and her actions become darker actions. Now, in the 21st century, Eustacia Weir would have much better prospects to become something in life, and they don't have to depend on men. Money, she had never felt its value before. Even to efface herself from the country means were required. So she was feeling very bad, humiliated. And I love this sentence. Extreme unhappiness weighed visibly upon her between the drippings of the rain from her umbrella to her mantle, from her mantle to the heather, from the heather to the earth. Very similar sounds could be heard coming from her lips. The tearfulness of the outer scene was repeated upon her face. So the absolute harmony in chaos. I was talking about anomaly. This was the height of it. That when Egdon weeps, it weeps with Eustacia. When Eustachia weeps, Egdon weeps with her. Can I go? Can I go? He is not great enough for me to give myself to. He does not suffice for my desire. She is talking about Wildeve. If he had been a Saul or a Bonaparte, but to break my marriage for him, it is too poor a luxury. And I have no money to go alone. And if I could, what comfort to me? I must drag on next year as I have dragged on this year and the year after that as before. How I have tried and tried to be a splendid woman, and how destiny has been against me. I do not deserve my lot, she cried in a frenzy of bitter revolt. Oh, the cruelty of putting me into this ill-conceived world. I was capable of much, but I have been injured and blighted and crushed by things beyond my control. Oh, how hard it is of heaven to devise such tortures for me who have done no harm to heaven at all. No harm to heaven, but she had made errors in judgment. We will probably have a later discussion on Eustacia Weir's character, why she is a tragic character, why Clym is a tragic character. There I will talk about her error of judgment, why fate is not responsible but she herself is responsible. If you want me to discuss these characters, write that down in the comment section. I'll do that later on. Let's come to Susan. What is Susan doing in her cottage? Susan, in the meantime, had built a wax idol of Eustacia Weir, tying even a small little red ribbon around it. She was convinced that Eustacia's presence had been bad for her children, and therefore she started to first prick that idol with pins and then put it to fire. And while doing that, she was saying the Lord's Prayer repeated backwards 3 times. And Hardy really describes the whole process with its all gory details of the wax melting and the pins dropping. Chapter 8, Rain, Darkness and Anxious Wanderers. While the effigy of Eustachia was melting to nothing and the fair woman herself was standing on rain barrow, her soul in an abyss of desolation seldom plumbed by one so young, Yeobright sat lonely at Bloom's End. Cinematographical details. The effigy of Eustachia melting down, Eustacia standing in rain, and Clym feeling depressed. Thomasin comes to meet him with her daughter, and after some time Eustacia's grandfather comes in and he says that, where's my granddaughter? And then he expresses his fears that Eustacia had been suicidal before. And so they feel worried and they move out to look for Eustacia and go towards Quiet Woman's Inn. Thomasin also rushes out, and she was carrying her baby when she meets the Reddleman, who offers to carry her baby, and there is a very sweet exchange of words between them, which shows the tenderness in Diggoryven's heart for her and the way he cares for her and her baby. The only thing which I want to read from this chapter is the part where Thomasin moves out into the rain and how she reacts to Egdon Heath. It's the same rain to which Eustacia is exposed. And Thomasin, imagine, she's carrying her baby with her, so it's more uncomfortable. But look at the description here. Yet in spite of all this, Thomasin was not sorry that she had started from Clym's house. To her there were not, as to Eustachia, demons in the air and malice in every bush and bough. The drops which lashed her face were not scorpions, but prosy rain. So she was not disgusted by the heat. She had a natural acceptance of heat. And so the heat was not demonic to her. Egdon in the mass was no monster whatever, but impersonal open ground. Her fears of the place were rational, her dislikes of its worst moods reasonable. Yes, I am a mother walking with my child, it's stormy night, of course I'll be quite afraid to walk beneath the trees, but that's rational fear. I was not scared of any demons here. At this time, it was, in her view, a windy, wet place in which a person might experience much discomfort, lose the path without care, and possibly catch cold. Anyway, so it was after this that she meets Diggoryven and they walk towards Quiet Woman's Inn. Wen wants to drop her off in safety. Chapter 9, the last chapter of the 5th book. Imagine the situation. Wildeve getting his horse and cart ready, and he goes outside Quiet Woman's Inn, just a little outside. Clym comes to that place. He first thinks that it might be Eustachia, and then he sees that it's Clym. And while they are standing in front of each other, while they both hung thus in hesitation, a dull sound became audible above the storm and wind. Its origin was unmistakable. It was the fall of a body into the stream in the adjoining mead, apparently at a point near the weir. So it was like a dam, it was like a pool, and a body had fallen. Both started. Good God, can it be she? Why should it be she? Now Wildeve was showing a lot of direct action. He was suddenly agitated. Why should it be Eustachia? Ah, that's you, you traitor, is it? Why should it be she? Because last week she would have put an end to her life if she had been able. Because he was referring to the episode of the pistols. She ought to have been watched. Take one of the lamps and come with me. So now their focus is to save Eustachia. They can postpone their arguments to some future discussion. Now they want to save her. Both of them, they reach the place. Wildeve, he can actually see the body of Eustachia floating up and down. He jumps straight in. Oh, my darling, exclaimed Wildeve in an agonized voice, and without showing sufficient presence of mind even to throw off his great coat. So even wearing that big coat, he leapt into the boiling cauldron. Not literally boiling, but it was frothing. It was full of current, and it was raining also. So he jumped straight in. He never had much presence of mind. So expected. Clym's actions are also very heroic here. Eobright could now also discern the floating body. He could now see the body, though but indistinctly, because his eyesight was not that good. And imagining from Wildeve's plunge, he saw that Wildeve plunged into, and he thought that, okay, if Wildeve has plunged in, maybe there is life to save, so I should also plunge. So he was carried off by the current. He saw Wildeve struggling. Now, while all this was happening, thankfully, Reddleman and Thomasin, they came to the spot, and Clym's lamp was there, from which, or the light from which illuminated the whole scene to the little man, who goes there to save these people, asks Thomasin to go back, run back and call for help. Anyway, finally, we have 3 bodies recovered from the Shadwater Weir. The insensible forms of Eustachia, Clym and Wildeve were then brought in and laid on the carpet with their feet to the fire. Then everybody tried to revive them, but only Clym was revived. Now from Wildeve's pocket, some notes were recovered, a lot of banknotes, because he was planning to escape with Eustachia for good. So he carried all the cash he had. Now those banknotes, they were wet and they were put to be dried in front of the furnace. Diggory Wen, he did not leave the place. Wen was loath to depart, for all on earth that interested him lay under this roof. So what did interest him? Thomasin. And Thomasin was here. And now, well, her husband was gone and he felt that she needed a support, of course. As nobody in the house had any more sleep that night except the 2 who slept forever, that is Eustacia and Wildeve. And then at 4 o'clock, there was a gentle knock at the door. It was from Charlie, who had been sent by Captain Vi. Charlie wants to see Eustacia for the last time. And when they go to see Eustacia Vi's body, she is beautifully described by Hardy because we see her for the last time too. They stood silently looking upon Eustacia, who, as she lay there, still in death, eclipsed all her living phases. She was looking the most beautiful now. Pallor did not include all the quality of her complexion, which seemed more than whiteness. It was almost light. So usually people die and they look pale, but here she was looking as if her whole face was lit up with brightness. The expression of her finely carved mouth was pleasant, as if a sense of dignity had just compelled her to leave off speaking. She has just stopped speaking in a proud way, and her face didn't show any sign of struggle. Her black hair was looser now than either of them had ever seen it before, and surrounded her brow like a forest. The stateliness of look, which had been almost too marked for a dweller in a country domicile, had at last found an artistically happy background. So stateliness of look, which doesn't come very easily to people belonging to the heath. That stateliness is there on her face. Clym takes Charlie to see Wildeve's body. They went to a recess in the same room, and there, on a smaller bed, lay another figure, Wildeve. Less repose was visible in his face than in Eustachia, so his face was more troubled than Eustachia's. And the least sympathetic observer would have felt at sight of him now that he was born for a higher destiny than this. He was also a very noble-looking person. Rousseau of Egdon, Hardy said. So he was an idealist, he wanted to save the woman he loved. And I'm not surprised. These kinds of people are most impulsive. They are capable of doing rash heroic things. Although I wouldn't say it very heroic, because he was more of a careless person to wear that big overcoat and jump into the water. But still, his impulse was heroic. The only sign upon him, this is important, please don't ignore this line. The only sign upon him of his recent struggle for life was in his fingertips, which were worn as sacrificed in his dying endeavors to obtain a hold on the face of the Weir world. So, his fingernails were crushed because he was trying to hold on to the walls of the Weir. So, he was not trying to commit suicide. He wanted to save Eustacia. And after some moments, he realized that he wouldn't be able to save her. He wanted to save himself. But no such mark was there in Eustacia's hands. So, do we call it accident? Because if it was accident, then similar descriptions would be given for Eustacia's fingernails too. Hardy wants to keep us in the dark, but he mentions this in case of Wildeve so that we question, why is that not mentioned in Eustacia's case? It's as enigmatic as Lady Macbeth's death, isn't it? Did she die or did she kill herself? Women who are too enigmatic, their death, their end is as enigmatic in literature. This we see in Lady Macbeth, this we see in Eustacia. Why? And somehow there is a tendency to make them more noble, make them more divine in their death. And this mystery adds to it, because we don't know what happened to Eustacia Weir. Clym finally speaks to Wen. He is severely depressed because now he feels that he has killed 2 women, his mother and his wife. How? Said Wen. I spoke cruel words to her and she left my house. I did not invite her back till it was too late. It is I who ought to have drowned myself. It would have been a charity to the living had the river overwhelmed me and borne her up. So if I was dead and she was alive, it would have been good because I am responsible for her death. But I cannot die. Those who ought to have lived lie dead, and here am I alive. Finally, Wen tries to console him. Your aim has always been good. Why should you say such desperate things? No, they are not desperate. They are only hopeless. And my great regret is that for what I have done, no man or law can punish me. I have not done any crime, but I am suffering because I have done so much wrong. So judgment, human judgment, divine judgment. What is Clym talking about? Hardy wanted to end his novel here, right here, with this sentence. But it was not to be so. Even back then, authors had to depend on feedback from readers, and there was kind of a popular pressure on him to give some element of consolation to the readers. Give us some happiness, give us some consolation, something to hold on to. This is too dark. And that gives us the 6th book, which is more like an epilogue. He calls it After Courses. We will read through that, maybe in a very short video, just to give you a hang of what actually happens after this. But with Eustacia's death and Wildeve's, the plotline comes to a pause. I'll meet you all in my next video when we will finally conclude the novel. I hope you have been with me through this very long video. I really enjoyed reading this book with you. Keep commenting, stay subscribed. See you all in my next video. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Stay happy, stay safe, bye-bye.